Hello, everybody. It's been a while. It's been a long while. It's been a long while for everybody, I assume. It's been a weird year for Cubism. It's been a weird year for Winnipeg. It's been a weird year for the globe.
Well,
But
2019 just started, right?
2019. But we're here after again. I'd rather, I want to call it a hiatus, but it's pretty our brand at this point. We take pretty considerable breaks. This time we kind of have an excuse. We'll get to that in a second. But we're back to here to talk about Kaldheim. It's been a bit. I honestly don't even remember the last set we talked about. It wasn't Zendikar Rising. We didn't talk about Zendikar Rising, right?
Don't test me like this.
I feel like I should. Regardless. So we're here to talk about Kaldheim. It's been a weird year, again, for everybody. But for a little bit of context of where we've been, at the beginning, during the pandemic, for the first however many months, April to so on, we were closed. Everyone was closed. No one could see anybody. So we cubed 0 times. With the exception of maybe Arena. And then, fast forward a bit, July happened, summer happened, our numbers got real good. Really, really good. Winnipeg's numbers were like 0 cases a day for some, every now and then. Or most of the time even. So then everything was lifted. We can then see each other for a bit. We're pretty, I'm not gonna lie, like the Winnipeg restrictions actually weren't too crazy. Once we reopened for the first time around July. We got together again, we were cubing again. We got really into Commander, not that that is relevant to this, but we started cubing again, but then kind of abruptly it ended again. Our cases spiked in August. Was that when it happened?
We closed down again in October, so it started spiking, end of August.
But I think end of August we started like getting together less. I know once we started hitting the hundreds of cases, we definitely I think we hit 100 cases a day for a little bit, and then it spiked to 400. And I think that's when we called it off. So you obviously
canceled it around when it was like starting to get to around the high hundreds. Like no more. We're gonna hold off, and then it was like 400 the next week.
yeah. So Drew, we typically get together at Drew's place. It got in the hundreds, and for when Manitoba's population, that is a lot per capita. So we called it off. We got together in smaller groups until eventually we just stopped getting together altogether, just to try to be as safe as possible. And we haven't cubed since. Winnipeg's been in Code Red since end of October. We're only now just relaxing some of the restrictions, but even then, our limit for guests in your home is 2 designated people. So you can choose 2 people, and they're allowed to come over. That isn't people that live in your house. So obviously we haven't cubed. We're not gonna be cubing for a while, and it may be if things keep going the way they are, we're at 50-ish cases a day now. That maybe we could be queuing again in a month or 2, but I'm not. As much as I do want to play more Magic, I'm pretty fiending for paper Magic. I don't want to force anything. I don't want to push it. We want to be as safe as possible. We don't. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So that aside, Kaldheim. We haven't talked about a couple sets, but Kaldheim was a pretty sweet set. We really didn't know with the big dip in us playing paper Magic whether or not we should still review cards. We toyed with it a bit when I was streaming during the summer. Then I've been back to work, so I've just had less time in general. But I kind of got raring to talk about cards again, so Drew and I are here talking about Kaldheim, and Austin, an old friend of ours. Him and I are doing some other Commander stuff, so here we are talking about Kaldheim. What was your initial impression of Kaldheim, Drew? Like before all the spoilers, like early spoilers.
Like first 2 days or something like that?
First couple days. We know it's going to be a snow set. That's all I remember.
I guess I was a little turned off in the regards that we haven't been cubing, so I was like, okay, there's a new set coming out, and I was ready to not be excited about anything. And I actually didn't write down many cards until the set was fully out, and I started reading through it. So I guess it was all like backloaded, like, ooh, this is interesting.
Yeah, there was definitely a disconnect during the summer, I think. Maybe just after. So being excited about Magic during the first lockdown, again, right at April, it was still easy to get excited about Magic. During summer, when everything opened up, it was really easy to get excited about Magic. We had been waiting for Ikoria. It got delayed. Everyone was fired up. We got to see each other in person again. I'm really excited, but then once the second drop off happened, it was kind of like I didn't know what it was for a long time, but I think the biggest disconnect was Cube. That 90% of what I got excited about during spoilers was cards I can try in Cube, new cards specifically for Cube. I've played a ton of Commander. I still play a ton of Commander via Spell Table, but it just doesn't. Magic doesn't. Spoiler season doesn't excite me for Commander. Not like Cube does. Cube was like the thing that you and I have done for a very, very long time. It's a thing that gets me the most excited for Magic. And again, Commander doesn't do it for me, but I think we eventually connect the dots that it was the missing link was Cube specifically.
Yeah, and eventually we got there. I got some stuff for written down. We're going to talk about them today, and I got some stuff for battle blocks. A handful, and stuff I might want to adjust in there as well. So
yeah. So for Kaldheim, we got a couple. We got a lot of returning faces, but first I want to go over the mechanics. The mechanics often can make or break a set in terms of, I guess, the viability in Cube. A lot of mechanics that are tribal centric or specifically focused around a certain type of card or the mechanic itself, where you have to have a lot of that mechanic to be good, can again make or break how good a set is or how good it translates to Cube. And this set, I think, does a pretty good job, depending how you feel about Snow. But the first mechanic we got is Foretell. So Foretell is on a wide variety of cards, I guess all on spells. So during your turn, you may pay 2 colorless, or 2 generic, and exile this card from your hand face down. Cast it on a later turn for its Foretell cost. Most of these cards, you pay an upfront 2 mana, and you get it for a discounted amount of mana later on, but combined is generally more expensive than the upfront cost if you were to play the spell in the first place, I believe. At least it is for most of the cards we're going to talk about here.
Most of the cards, yeah.
That or you at least break even. So you get to kind of like, invest early, get a better deal late. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I had a hard time. I was trying to kind of prep myself talking about this mechanic and trying to find a mechanic that it most relates to, and I couldn't think of it. I think the one I landed on was Morph.
It's about as close as it's the one that comes to your mind, right? Face down cards.
Yeah, not that
morphs
morphs are creatures. These are not. This is something entirely, but it's that it creates this mind game of what this card is, and the more you have of them, the better the mechanic is. So a lot of morphs nowadays is what's the green one? I can't remember off the top of my head. That regrowths the card.
I just cut it, so
yeah, there's not a lot of them left anymore. Why can't I remember the name of that card? I played it for so long.
Answer is Den Protector.
Den Protector, that's the one. So Den Protector was kind of, at least for us, the last of the morphs that kind of like stood the test of time. And you always knew it was Den Protector, but it was still good enough. And there was always the conversation of like, the more morphs you play, the more interesting morphs are to play with and against, right? And when you're not sure what it is, there's kind of a mind game. When you know exactly what it is, there's no mind game. So Foretell cards, I would imagine, are going to be along a similar vein, where if you only play one of them and you always know what it is, there's nothing really to worry about. But they kind of like, I don't want to say these cards are strength in numbers, but the cards just get a little better. I'm not sure how many percentage points, but they definitely gain some amount of playability the more you have. There are definitely ones we're going to talk about that are strong enough on their own, and then probably just on the edge, and then can maybe edge out in multiples, if that makes sense. The next mechanic we have is Boast. Boast is a activated ability you will get on creatures. So creatures can activate their boasts if this creature attacked this turn and only once each turn. So after a creature is attacked, you can then activate its boast ability. Whatever. Sometimes it gives it additional power. Sometimes it makes additional creatures. Sometimes it vampiric tutors you. There's a wide variety of boast, but it's a pretty generic mechanic. Not quite Bloodthirst generic, but pretty generic, so that's pretty great. We got the return of modal double face cards from Zendikar Rising. Not like the transform cards from the past. You can choose to play either side A or side B. We got the return of Snow from all the way back from Ice Age into Cold Snap, into Modern Horizons, into this set. I know when Modern Horizons came out, it feels like last year, but it was 2019. The past couple year and a half has been kind of a
That was
blur.
2018.
There's no way Modern Horizons is 2018. I'm checking. June 14th, 2019. Feels
Okay.
like yesterday. So when we went to Modern Horizons and we got Snow again, it was the first time we got in a very long time. So it's kind of surprising to us to go back to Snow. What feels like so fast. There'd always been such big leaps between them, but to go back to Snow so quickly is pretty sweet. I know when Horizons came out, it got a lot of people talking about the conversation again. To add Snow or to not add Snow. It's made Snowlands attainable. They were getting fairly expensive when they were only in Cold Snap and Ice Age, and just hard to find for a very long time. So Modern Horizons made them very, very easy to get. And here we are now. They're even easier to get with a cool new snow border that exists. So Snow's back. These other ones, we got Sagas coming back from Dominaria. They've kind of been in a couple sets, but Sagas seem to play well. People seem to enjoy them quite a bit. And then Changeling, which is a mechanic that's returned a couple times, but originally from Lorwyn. Changeling is a mechanic that typically doesn't affect Cube very much. There's been a handful throughout time, like Taurine Mauler and Changeling, or Chameleon Colossus, that were good on regardless of the Changeling mechanic, but good on their own. But there's not a whole lot of them that stick around anymore. But to talk about Snow again, really quickly. So obviously, it's really hard to talk about Kaldheim without talking about Snow. Kaldheim ended up being a deeper set than we thought. Well, a little deeper set than we thought it was going to be. And I think to clump up Snow and not Snow in one conversation wouldn't be doing Snow justice. So alongside this episode, we're going to be recording an episode just dedicated to just Snow. The pros and cons of what we feel about Snow. We're going to review the Snow cards from Kaldheim and overall what Snow brings as a cube experience, or what it can bring to you, how to implement it, whether or not we ultimately think it's worth it after all this time. So that's going to be another video, so look out for that. But that's it. So these are the mechanics. So obviously the big one is Snow, which is hard to evaluate because some people hate it, some people love it, and if your cube has it, like obviously these cards are easy, but if your cube doesn't, then you might say a large part of the set is a write-off. But even with Snow removed, we still have a fair bit of cards to talk about, and I guess we're gonna get into those. The first one we're gonna get into is I don't want to say it's a waste to talk about because it's so obvious. But the first card we're going to talk about in color order. So we're going to go white, blue, black, red, green. That took me a second to think about for some reason. Multicolored colorless. But the first card we're going to talk about is Usher of the Fallen. So Usher of the Fallen is 1 white for a 2/1 spirit warrior and has Boast, 1 and a white. Create a 1/1 white human warrior creature token.
I do like myself the Simplastic Savannah Lions, right? So
what a surprise! Like Savannah Lions has come such a long way now. This one has not super relevant creature types, not a human. But at this point, if that's a thing that I'm complaining about, you know what? That's okay probably.
you can make a point it's not a knight because of the other knight Savannah
not a
Lions.
knight. Yeah. It doesn't get buffed by the Saga. I can't remember the name of it for some reason.
History of Benalia?
History of Benalia. That card's great. Big fan of History of Benalia. But yeah, Usher of the Fallen is a fantastic card. Savannah Lions that can pump out extra 1/1s when you've either run out of cards or you have spare mana lying around. It's hard to not like this card. Probably the easiest the card in the set to add to every cube. There's very little to talk about with this card. So the next card we're going to talk about is Clarion Spirit. Clarion Spirit is a little more interesting. I think it's definitely up the alley of the Spells Batters decks if you want to splash white. So Clarion Spirit is 1 and a white for a 2/2 spirit Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. Kind of a white. I don't even want to call it a white young pyromancer because it's not at all young pyromancer.
Well, it's similar. Like this is a popular type of archetype that many people play, and this allows them to branch out into a slightly different color, whether you want it or not.
Do you ever play this in like your blue-white decks as a guy that can presumably get a free guy every other turn when you cantrip?
I think, yeah, if your deck is loaded, or your cube in general is loaded with more types of effects that you like to ponder and stuff on your turn, and then play a spell, this will be excellent for you. But if you're more of like a counterspelly type of variant, then not as much. Uh, Red white aggro. If you lots of burn spells, burn guy, could build a little army that way.
So I guess how much playability does this card have in the aggressive decks? I don't really like it. So I guess like the spells matter deck is blue red. It could be blue red X, but how often are you going to fit in Clarion Spirit to cast your second spell? I don't want to undervalue this card's ability. The creature you get off of it is pretty good. It's a 1/1 flying spirit. The 2/2 body, like the floor on this card isn't good. You know, it's a 2-mana 2/2. How many 1/1s you have to get out of this thing to kind of be worth it? I
Two,
think
probably.
it's yeah. I think the bar is 2. You have to get 2 to kind of be worth your while. I'm not sure if there's a blue-white spells matter deck. If you play like blue-white tempo, there's probably a world where this card is very strong. But I guess there's an existing, existing archetypes that are I guess a little more common. I think it's hard to fit this card in. Again, I don't want to downplay how powerful I think this card can be. This card's obviously could be a monster constructed card. Obviously paired with Foretell. You know, you can play a regular spell, discounted spell. You're getting some 1/1s. You get a couple of them going, make a lot of 1/1s. I do think this card is a really cool constructed card. I think bit of a miss in Cube, unless again you're kind of already playing that archetype. You know, the tempo or a lot of Foretell spells. You know, if you spells matter happens to bleed into white. I do think that it is the third color to the party, and it doesn't bring enough. It's kind of where I'm at. So that brings us to the next card. Sigrid?
Sigrid.
I'm gonna go with Sigrid. God favored. 1 white 2/2 human warrior. Legendary creature human warrior. Flash. First strike, protection from god creatures. When Sigrid enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 target attacking or blocking creature until Sigrid leaves the battlefield. This card has a lot
Coming
of text.
to a brawl deck near you.
This card has a ton of text. Okay, so it's a 3-mana 2/2 flash first strike that can banish or priest an attacking or blocking creature.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take Banisher Priest. So Banisher Priest is a card, not good. Not a fan. Long time ago, Banisher Priest, okay. I don't even want to say it was good. It was okay. It was passable. We're now at the point, Banisher Priest. I'm never looking back at Banisher Priest. Don't want Banisher Priest. So how many abilities and stats, I guess this card doesn't get to, how many abilities do I have to give Banisher Priest to make him good enough?
Well, if you want to compare it to the other new card we got recently, the Skyclave
Skyclave Apparition.
guy,
Yeah.
Skyclave Apparition, because that one can target any permanent. I think it's 4 or less, right?
Yeah.
And that one, since it can answer, let's say, a Dark Confidant that's not attacking,
The Planeswalker,
that's the important part.
you know,
Planeswalker.
Cheat, you know, so many cards. Skyclave Apparition, I get to sum up our Zendikar Rising review. Skyclave Apparition is insane.
Yeah, and this guy only targets things that are attacking or blocking, which means to satisfy the trigger, you either have to be defending heavily or on the offense heavily. And you're not to get proper value from this card. I think you need to be both blocking and flash in and trade something, or because it's got first strike.
So it's an interesting in the aggressive decks, you kind of go guy attack. If they have a reasonable blocker, you can flash this into play the Banisher Priest. At that point, it's just kind of a fancy Banisher Priest. On the defense, you know, I'm more likely to play this what looks like a white aggressive card in my maybe control deck because I can flash in a Goblin Piker. I don't know. The protection from gods is virtually irrelevant. The clause that the creature has to be attacking or blocking is a pretty big ask. It has the the problem most white 3-drops have of costing 1 white has a lot of... This card has a lot of flash going on, literally, and I think the clause makes it just unfortunately not good enough. Maybe it's making it a 3/2 is too good, right? Like if this is a 3/2 flash first strike, that text is already fine.
That's probably too good.
Right.
It's got a lot of text, but it doesn't have a lot of I really want to put this in my deck in that
No,
text.
I don't exactly know what role this card's gonna serve, other than yeah, I don't know. Like I feel like I'm just gonna play this as on 3, pretty much as a sorcery, and yeah, I don't know how often that this is coming up, other than trying to like ram through some giant guy. Yeah, like I don't know. This brings us to our first foretell card, Glorious Protector. So Glorious Protector is a 2 white 3/4 Angel Cleric. Flash flying. When Glorious Protector enters the battlefield, you may exile any number of non-angel creatures you control until it leaves the battlefield. Foretell 2 and a white. So Restoration Angel is the obvious comparison. Extremely similar stats. Slightly harder to cast. But 4 mana 3/4 Flying Flash. With a weird
You
ability.
can save your guys from removal, I guess, for a while, right?
Yeah. So it does.
How bad is this to get this guy Song of the Dryads, right?
Pretty bad. That'd be very, very, very funny. You know, to get Song of the Dryads or Imprisoned in the Moon. The stats are fine. It's a white 4-drop that is serviceable. The control decks will most likely play it as just as often as they play Restoration Angel. It doesn't flicker something like Restoration Angel. It does, even with the foretell discount, I do think it is just worse than Restoration Angel. But it's all, well, I think obviously worse than Restoration Angel. But again, I think this card is really close. Again, the CMC stats I think are all really, really close to making me want to play this card in like an average power level cube. That this is the kind of card I put maybe a little more weight on of how many other foretell cards do I play? You know, if it's do I have a counterspell, a wrath, a blocker? What is it going to be? And the fact that it has flash, you know, that the control decks, which is what ended up being most of the foretell cards, are pretty fine playing this card. You know, I just have a big Ambush Viper. That's typically the kind of creature the blue decks want to play anyway. So I'm not looking to cut any of my current 4-drops for it, but again, I think if you have the critical mass of foretell cards, the value of this card goes up at least a couple points. But other than that,
yeah, I think I'd be more excited about this if we didn't get Bazirator's Tenant and Luminous Broodmoth like within the last year.
Both, you know, super good 4-drops, but also again, both mostly for the creature decks. This one can be in a creature deck, but can also be in the control deck. So it kind of feels it kind of does a little bit of double duty. It's obviously not going to be the best creature 4-drop, but it's not going to be the best control 4-drop. But it serves a purpose. That's perfect. It's like perfectly average.
It fits in both decks.
Yeah, I do again think there's more weight if you do have the foretell package, but you know, we'll see how well that lasts. That brings us to our first double face card, Halvar, God of Battle, which I think was one of the first spoiled cards, maybe in the entire set. But Halvar, God of Battle
might have been the one that showed the new showcase border. But yeah,
it's it. Halvar, God of Battle is the front side of it is 2 white 4/4 legendary creature god. Creatures you control that are enchanted or equipped have double strike. At the beginning of each combat you may attach target aura or equipment attached to a creature you control to target creature you control. I've never actually read that out loud. That's a bit of text. The other side of it is Sword of the Realms. 1 and a white, legendary artifact equipment. The equipped creature gets +2/+7 and has vigilance. Whenever an equipped creature dies, return it to its owner's hand. Equip 1 and a white. So let's talk about the front side of Halvar first. 4 mana 4/4. Kind of no abilities. Kind.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of auras running around in cube. So equipment is obviously the relevant part of this text. So he attaches target equipment attached to a creature you control to target creature you control. So he can move around already equipped equipments to other creatures. That's
See,
kind of
obviously
weird.
the text that you want is attaching non-equipped stuff to dudes you control. Yeah, it doesn't do that.
Right. So yeah, him being able to move auras is really interesting, which again doesn't have a lot of relevance in Cube. A lot of time,
Move
unless
that
you're
Rancor.
super deep. You know, if you play a lot of auras, this card has a very unique ability. But in terms of this equipment, there's a lot of equipment running around. People love equipment. People love swords. Being able to discount the heavy price to equip swords of 2, and maybe a battle scroll here and there isn't a nothing. But I do think it's not again not the reason why I'm playing this card. Again, the equipped creature has double strike. Also is kind of fine, but very much an afterthought. I do think the reason why you're playing this card is for the equipment, but it does both. You need a threat. You can play this 4/4. Not a great threat, but you can play a threat. You need, you already have a bunch of creatures in play. You can play this. You can play this equipment that makes your guys more resilient. So, Sword of the Realms, 2 mana. It's costs 2 mana. It's +2/+1 vigilance. Equips for 1 and a white, which is a pretty big ask. And then whatever creature dies, return it to his owner's hand.
I think this is playable.
I
Like,
think
if
so
I were to put this in my
too.
cube, I would have this as the front side because it's going to be most commonly this card.
I think it's also most commonly this card. So this feels like a chunky bone splitter. It costs 2 to play, 2 to equip, gets +2/+soul, gains vigilance. Vigilance is an okay ability, but the all the weight is in the returning it when it dies. So this card isn't a aggressive, like if you're playing a very aggressive deck, this isn't the equipment you want to be playing. If you're playing a mid-range deck or even a control deck where you have these very high value mid-range creatures that you can buy back from Sword of the Realms, I think that's kind of the world you want to be playing this kind of card. Not that those decks already have a problem gaining value, but this kind of card kind of kicks it in the I don't want to say a higher gear, but again, making these threats more resilient, attacking and blocking, being able to buy back these kind of fatty 4 and 5 mana creatures that have come to play abilities are I assume is where this card is going to shine. The front side of the card is if he top deck it late, it's a 4 mana 4/4. That's a serviceable body. But if you have a board already, Sword of the Realms just helps you kind of take control of the board more. I think this card is a good example of something that I think the Sword of the Realms side of this card is interesting. Not interesting enough on its own, but because it also has this oh hey, just in case you just need a guy, I can also just be a guy.
Yep.
I think as a package deal, I like this card. The text on the front side I don't think is going to be too relevant, but if it does, it's going to make a lot of interesting stories. So Halvar isn't the aggressive 4-drop you want. It's very much just more mid-range creatures, more of a mid-range creature, which there are a ton of. So this isn't probably the card everybody wants. This card definitely feels like you can just swap in and out with other various value mid-range creatures. But at least Halvar is interesting. To be able to have both sides. I guess what's the word? What am I trying to get at here?
It reads like a split card, so like while either side is good on its own, the package deal makes it more attractive choice.
Yeah, I would not play either side just by themselves. But because it has both, I will take both. Alright, so the next card we got is another Foretell card. There's a lot of white cards. We're not even done with the white cards. I think this might be the first time we have, which I'm just literally making up on the spot, we're talking about a lot of white cards, the most amount of white cards in a particular set.
That might actually be true, yeah.
It might actually, white's pretty, not historically a strong color, but it has easily the most cards we're talking about in this set. And that brings us to Starnheim Unleashed. A 2 white sorcery. Create a 4/4 white angel warrior creature token with flying and vigilance. If the spell was foretold, create X of those tokens instead. And the foretell cost is X white. So, it's a 4 mana 4/4 flying vigilance. Worst case, that's the floor of this card, which is better than Halvar, better than the front side of Halvar. But it has this decree of justice.
Wrong decree.
Yeah, decree of justice-esque ability that lets you cast the spell for a bunch of angels. So you get the foretell it for 2 early. Your opponent gets to worry about it for a while until you rip. 6 mana into this, or sorry, 7, and make 3 angels. Or worst case, you put 3 mana into it and make 1 angel. So the foretell cost for this card, casting it for foretell is where you want to be. If you need a guy in a spot and you draw it, you can still pay 4 mana for a 4/4 Flying Vigilance. But this one's going a little more long game. And I think this is a really easy way for control decks to seal the game. I think it's a card that I'm more happy to play than Entreat the Angels. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it might be the best card in the set for limited, and usually those translate well to cube.
It makes sense. Like
yeah,
Entreat the Angels is obviously a more powerful card when Miracle, and when you have the tutors to do it, the card is very, very powerful. When you have the means to manipulate that card as much as possible, Entreat's going to be the better card, but Starnheim Unleashed can still play fine in like a little more aggressive decks to even mid-range decks, where Entreat the Angels was almost exclusively a control card. Because again, this card, worst case, 4 mana 4/4 Flying Vigilance. Best case, a bunch of mana for a bunch of 4/4 Flying Vigilance. I don't think this card needs a ton of testing. I think this is easily one of the strongest foretell cards that you just don't need any other foretell cards. Even if your opponent knows about this, it's still going to be a problem.
Yeah, I think it's got a lot going for it. It's even got great arts on both versions of the cards. So
it does. I do like the borderless one a lot. I think the borderless one is my favorite. Mostly it's showcase. This one doesn't have a showcase card, but I thought the full art version of this card is very, very nice. All right, and that brings us to our last card, our last white card, Doomskar. Doomskar is 3 white for a sorcery. Destroy all creatures. Foretell, 1 white. This one probably has gotten, maybe not the most discussion, but it's definitely the card I hear about the most. I think when this card was originally spoiled, people just didn't like it. And I'm not talking about in the cube world, just in at work, at the card shop. People didn't seem excited about this card, but I think once you play this card literally one time, I'm pretty happy to cast this card. It's obviously no Wrath of God. It's no Day Judgment. But there are a few Wraths that you can play on turn 3 that just straight up destroy all creatures. Like Toxic Delusion is obviously one of the best Wraths that is, it's best Black Wrath easily. Maybe best Wrath printed. But the fact that Doomskar against those really, really aggressive decks, you can foretell on 2, Doomskar on 3, is fantastic. Just the potential of getting this discounted Wrath later on, super nice. The 5 mana Wrath, there are a million 5 mana Wraths that exist at this point, but I think this is my favorite one right after the 4 mana Wraths.
Yeah, the big plus on this is you can foretell it, and then since the foretell cost is cheap enough that you can usually play it and either have mana to spare or deploy something of your own in the same turn, where usually you'd have to devote your entire turn to the Wrath effect.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. Being able to, if you're not jamming at turn 3, even like if you jam at turn 5, being able to Doomskar and hold up something, or Doomskar and play something, it's a pretty big tempo gain. That I think it makes this card very, very strong. Being able to like Doomskar, hold up Essence Scatter instead of just having to Wrath and then let their next thing resolve. I think this opens up this card to a lot of possibilities, and I think is again a strong enough card to play without any other foretell cards. Even if they know it's there, just knowing that you have this Wrath they cannot interact with or manipulate is a problem. The fact that you can't Thoughtseize this out of their hand is better than you having it in your hand when it's foretold. So
yep.
Again, another card that strong enough just without the foretell mechanic. Or sorry, strong enough without any other foretell cards. I think this is. I don't want to say I'm just convinced it's the 3rd best Wrath in white. I'm sure I'm forgetting something silly, but this is definitely the first 5 mana Wrath I'm looking to play at the moment. So that brings us to blue. Blue is actually. I don't want to be a little shallower this set, which is probably for the best. Blue is one of the most competitive colors in Cube. It's okay to be, maybe a little more modest every now and then. Blue-green's gotten a lot of layups the last little bit. What's the first card we're going to talk about? And you know what most cards are talking about? I don't know if any of them are slam dunks. In fact, I don't think... First card we're talking about. Bind the Monster. I thought this card was Bind the Monstrous forever. Bind the monster is 1 blue enchantment aura. Enchant creature. When bind the monster enters the battlefield, tap enchanted creature. It deals damage equal to its power, or deals damage to you equal to its power. Enchanted creature doesn't untap during its untap step. So they've blue has always been, they don't really deal with a problem head on. They bounce things or tap things or claustrophobia things. They're really good at keeping things tapped. They're really good at bouncing things, but they don't really deal with problems head on. They don't just kill things. So bind the monster is the most aggressively costed version of all those sleep enchantment effects at only 1 mana. Being able to lock down, if they have a turn 1 mana elf, you can lock it down. They have a mid-range guy you just can't deal with, you can lock it down. You do take the upfront damage, but you just might have to deal with that problem anymore. I do like that this card. I'm more often probably going to use it on like a mana guy or like an early guy to slow them down, and then or a big guy. The threat I just don't have an upfront answer for. I think this card.
Yeah. I guess blue in the last several sets has had somewhat small answers like this, and they always make my short list. But they usually like reduce the power or tap it after it's already tapped. And while this one made my short list, I don't know if I'm fully on board with it either. They always kind of make it there, but they never like make it into my list.
So for these kind of so blue, it's such a competitive color to get into. I can very easily swap bind the monster with a slew of bounce spells that are just already efficient enough. I do like bind the monster. It's a really good early blue card that I can spend to slow down my aggressive opponent. In control mirrors, it can lock down maybe a potential win condition. That being said, a lot of the control mirror breakers nowadays are like the Aetherling-esque, Dream Trawler-esque creatures that don't really die to removal. That's why they're so good in those control decks. So I know bind the monsters in terms of popper is a slam dunk. It's the fact that this is a common makes this card. I think this is very, very, very generous that this card was a common. I haven't played with this card a lot. Admittedly, I think I need to get a couple rounds with it to kind of fully understand how much I like it. But I think at face value, to be able to maybe permanently deal with any creature that, from attacking you at least, it still doesn't stop Dark Confident, has to be a good deal. For 1 blue, it has to be a good deal. Again, they can kill it. There's a lot of ways to interact with this card. But for the investment, it seems hard to lose. So the first foretell card we're going to talk about in blue is Saw It Coming. Saw It Coming is 1 blue instant, counter target spell, foretell for 1 in a blue. Now that that's out of the way, I'm pretty over these pun counterspell names that Wizards keeps making. Maybe the back-to-back didn't say please into, Saw It Coming a year later. I'm over it. I don't want these pun counterspell names. It grinds my gears. It makes me so much more mad when my spell gets didn't say pleased than any other counterspell in Magic. Probably. I'll get dazed before I get didn't say please, just because I hate the name. So maybe that's
at least you don't have to play paper Magic in a pre-release and have people cast this on you, because getting it in person as opposed to online,
it does
way worse.
And it happened to a friend of ours. Had a bad night. Anyway, so Saw It Coming is boring. This card is definitely not the counterspell you want to look for in a in a very high power environment. If you're in the world where we're playing cancels, the hard counter for 1 in a blue is appealing, but the upfront deal of 2 colorless is a pretty big ask, especially in blue, obviously, if you're playing a Legacy Vintage Cube or Vintage Cube, your options for counterspells are pretty deep. I'm more often playing even the soft counters, Mana Leak, Miscalc, versus this kind of card. I know in Vintage, I can't imagine a world where I'm trying to play Saw It Comings, but again, you play enough foretell spells, like who knows what it is. So I understand this isn't a good sales pitch for Saw It Coming. I'm not a big fan, but I figured it was worth talking about. Again, I do think if you play enough foretell cards, this card again gains a couple percentage points. That maybe makes it more a part of the conversation. You have your 3/4 Flying Flash, your Decree of Justice, your Wrath of God, your Saw It Comings, your bad match pun names. Who knows? The world's yours. So, yeah, I don't know. That's kind of how I feel about this card. Even the
right
flavor
now,
text.
I guess I have 1 cancel, and I'm running Neutralize. I guess that's the one that cycles. So, but I haven't given that one much testing. So I
Oh
could
yeah, one
try
second.
this one.
I know in modern, so in my modern cube, you have to play some amount of them. One of the biggest things you lose in the modern environment is 2 mana counter spells. Like to the point where I was playing Quench, 2 mana,
RuneStack.
pretty much 2 mana counter target spell unless you pay 2. It's just a miscalc without cycling, just because having counter spells at 2 is very, very important. If your blue deck is countering spells at 3 against creature decks, you're probably losing. So I have to play some amount of the 3 mana ones. I think if I, for variety's sake, if I was playing enough of the foretell cards, I try Saw It Coming. But I, again, in a world where I'm playing, Neutralize where it has cycling or Dissolve where it has Scry 1, I think swapping those out for Saw Coming again alongside with the rest of the foretell cards is worth trying it out. If this is the only foretell card I'm trying, then no, I'd rather take the Scry off Dissolve. I'd rather take the cycling off of Neutralize. So that's it, I guess.
Yeah.
The next blue card we got is, they might all have foretell. Spoiler alert. Is Behold the Multiverse. So Behold the Multiverse is 3 and a blue instant, scry 2, then draw 2, foretell for 1 and a blue. So these 4 mana instant draw spells have become a lot more popular recently. Maybe not even recently. With Glimmer of Genius was probably the first one that people were like, yeah, this like 4 mana instant speed divination is very strong. It gives you energy, which was very, very relevant at the time. Since then, we've got a couple more variants of it where it's okay to play this like 4 mana draw X amount of cards with some amount of condition or something else other than drawing cards. This one scries 2. Yeah, so Glimmer Genius was the card, I guess, yeah, is the card I'm thinking of. Scry 2, draw 2 for 4 mana. You go pretty deep. I've played that card I think I played one of that card in the Legacy environment. I've played some amount of it in Modern for sure. So this version is, I think, the version I like the most. Again, it is Glimmer Genius broken down, doesn't have the energy, but to be able to foretell this card when you have extra mana early and then cast it for 2 mana late, you're still investing the same amount of mana, but the effect is like very, very powerful. I think this is, again, not necessarily an effect everyone's going to want. Not everyone's going this deep into these draw effects, but again, in combination with other foretell spells, I am a fan. Even outside of foretell, I think this card is very, very close if you're in this world of these 4 mana instant speed draw spells. I'm not sure. I don't want to compare it to Fact or Fiction. Fact or Fiction serves a different purpose, and it puts all the onus it lets your opponents make the mistake for you. Where this card digs and finds you maybe the more specific cards you want. Fact or Fiction again lets your opponents open up to make the mistake to give you doesn't know what you want and can give you more than you need. So I do like Fact
This one
whenever
like
possible.
Doomstar. Yeah, this one like Doomscar, I guess, has the thing where you can pay 2 on turn 4, where normally you'd have to invest your 4 mana for your other cards or your Fact or Fiction. You can leave up Mana Leak, and if they don't play anything relevant, you could finish off your foretell cost in their turn. So.
Yeah, being able to pair this up with another spell in a turn, being able to catch a remand and Behold the Multiverse turn 4 is pretty big. It does again, and it needs you to skip turn 2, which I don't want to undersell in the control decks. Turn 2 is very, very, very important typically. So fitting in these this kind of luxury spell as opposed to Saw Coming or Doomskar or making blockers is a bit more of an ask because again, turn 2 very important. But being able to see, be able to play this thing turn 3 if you need to, being able to pair it with a spell turn 4, there's a lot of potential for it. I do like the card. Again, I don't think this is for everybody, but I'm definitely very, very. This is a world of a card out to stuff for sure. And that brings us to a last one. I don't know why it came up last. From what I understand, the link I sent you was sorting them all by CMC. But we have Ravenform. 2 and a blue sorcery. Exile target artifact or creature. Its controller creates a 1/1 blue bird creature token flying. Foretell. 1 blue mana. So, like I talked about earlier, blue typically doesn't deal with things that head on. It inconveniences things. taps things, bounces things, it counters things, but once it's in play, it doesn't really just kill things. And Ravenform lets you do those things. I know when this card got spoiled, it was a bit of a head turner. Why isn't this card white?
Why isn't it white?
That's pretty much it. That's pretty much what this card was. Why does it exile artifacts? Blue doesn't exile artifacts. Why isn't this white? It was mostly why isn't this white? So Ravenform, with the luxury of cube, you typically don't need to dig deep. You know, blue not having ways to just head-on deal with a permanent in play isn't that big a deal, because you can play other colors, right? You can play white, red, black, green. But those colors let you deal with these things. But if you are really heavy into blue, and sometimes, you know, premium removal spells typically drop pretty fast, Ravenform isn't a path or a Heartless Act or these things that, you know, these other very premium removal spells, but it does something that blue is typically bad at, which is dealing with creatures in play and randomly artifacts. Troublesome equipment, fast mana, you name it. This card kind of deals with a lot of things. It is a sorcery, which isn't really blue doesn't really like playing on its own like on its turn, likes taking up other people's turns. So I'm not sure how this card will play. I think from what I understand, people are saying it's not that great. It's not as good as you think it is in limited. I'm really curious how it'll translate to cube.
Well, if you wanted me to summarize your previous statement there, is saying you should try it because it's not a good removal spell, and the blue deck will be able to grab it.
That is something. Again, it isn't the premium removal spell in other colors. It is the blue removal spell in blue that the blue decks can get pretty easily. So I think this card is powerful. I don't know exactly where it fits. I do think I need to play with this card a bit to kind of get my the reins grasp, whatever you want to call it. But I would for sure test this card. I'm a fan of this card. I'm not sure what size you have to be into to play this card. Again, blue is one of the toughest slots to get into, and it's really easy to be like, oh, I can just play an Into the Royal effect, or I can just play a whatever, because blue has so many ways to deal with things really annoyingly. So Ravenform probably isn't the card everyone's clamoring for, but I do think it's worth trying out. And even though it isn't the best option because you have access to other colors, I do think that, again, being able to kind of guarantee that this blue player is ever going to be able to get this effect, kind of like Supreme Verdict. I think when Supreme Verdict was spoiled, a lot of people were like, oh, why do I need Supreme Verdict? Like, I have Wrath, I have Day Judgment, and various other Wraths. Why do I need this blue-white Wrath? And the fact that your Azorius player is kind of like that, it's geared for that deck. They're going to get him more often than not, because the white X other players won't just be taking it.
It's kind of having a reward for that deck.
Kind of having these cards kind of lying around for that. If I want to play mono blue, isn't terrible. So that's kind of my opinion on Ravenform. I do like the card. I haven't played it much, admittedly. I haven't played it much in Arena or against it really either. But I am impressed with this common again. I think a very powerful common that also wasn't white. All right, we're going to move into black now. Our first black card is going to be Eradicator Valkyrie. So Eradicator Valkyrie is our new 4-mana 4/3 Mythic Angel for the set. We seem to get a couple of these every now and then. So Eradicator Valkyrie, 2 black 4/3 Angel Berserker, pretty cool creature type. Flying lifelink hexproof from Planeswalkers. It has Boast, 1 and a black, sacrifice a creature. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or Planeswalker.
Very wants to be played in a wiener deck, right?
Oh yeah, like black's creatures. The past how many black creatures they've printed recently? That black has no shortage of creatures to sacrifice to this thing. Not a problem. The biggest giant red flag for this card for me is a 3 toughness. It dies to literally every burn spell. Not literally, but most of them. I'd rather this card was a 3/4 for that reason. But it does hit super hard. It has lifelink, which is going to help you in a handful of matchups. Hexproof from Planeswalkers, I'm legitimately not sure how relevant that is.
Can't be a Johnny Vengeance, right?
Cannot be a Johnny Vengeance. Doesn't die to that burn spell. I don't think that's super relevant. I don't know if there's a ton of Planeswalkers. I don't think there's a ton of Planeswalkers. At least the more mainstream ones that directly affect this. I can't hide it with Teferi. You can't chase the Mind Sculptor. That's a win.
Tap it with Tamio.
So 4-mana 4/3 flying lifelink. Stats aren't terrible. Again, does die to a lot of the 3-mana burn spells. Its ability is very black flavored. You know, again, there's tons of black creatures that fit into this world that you can sacrifice and buy back multiple times. I think it's a pretty easy card to like. Its stats are fine. Its ability is okay. Its art's cool. There's a lot to like. It's a 4-drop in black that is. I don't want to say it's not aggressively costed, but it's a creature that attacks. Which black typically has these like variations of demons that try to do this. But I think Eradicator Valkyrie is an interesting version. I'm not sure how sold I am on it. Again, I'm just terrified of the 3 toughness. It has a neat animation in arena.
It's one of the cheaper, aggressively statted creatures in 4 that like to attack, and I think I like my other 4-drops more than this one.
Mhm.
In addition to that, I'm not sure how you become a berserker. Do you have to go to school for that? It's like a job, right?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that Angels was a creature type that they focused on in this set. I think they did a really good job with it, to be honest. Like almost to the point where there's like a deck in standard, which is pretty awesome. So I know a lot
Yeah,
of people.
it's the they're leaning in on the Norse, I guess,
Oh,
right? So
absolutely.
they got the
Yeah, yeah,
Valkyries, right? So it
yeah.
makes
No,
sense.
I'm really
It's neat
happy
that
to
they
hear that.
lean. Yeah,
Yeah, they
very
printed
nice.
the like cheaper Angels. They printed the like Dragon Speaker Shaman for Angels. They kind of did everything they needed to make Angels kind of a more real creature type that isn't these big flashy Gisela effects. It's kind of what Giants and Dragons needed. Like these big flashy creature types are cool, but you need these kind of lower to the ground, do something before turn 7. And yeah, Eradicator Valkyrie is sweet. It doesn't really pair well with the Angel deck. You don't really sacrifice a lot of Angels to it, obviously. But you have a lot of Wiener black creatures to sacrifice to it, or Wiener tokens from white to sacrifice to it. And I'm sure this card can do a lot. Again, being able to Edict Planeswalkers is nice against control decks. The like just Innocent Blood effect isn't just dead against them, which is nice. Like if you don't want to attack it, I guess. But you can
They
do
have to
both.
choose, right?
You can attack them and Edict Teferi. What a play. So, the second and only other black card we're talking about today is Rise of the Dreadmon. Marn. 2 to black instant. Create X 2/2 black zombie berserker creature tokens, where X is the number of non-token creatures that died this turn. This card has Foretell for 1 black. But again, because it is the only black Foretell card that I think is in the conversation, it's not really going to be part of the whole other Foretell package. But wow, is this like the best version of Caller of the Claw? Is this the best Caller of the Claw that exists?
So every time one of these cards come up, I just think Caller of the Claw and I think unplayable. It's you could play it in the Foretell deck. You could Doomskar and then Rise your guys
Ooh,
back,
you
right?
can.
That's a combo.
That's a combination. That's good deck building.
I can't Caller of the Claw. I just wanted it to be good, and I think I've tried some other versions of the cards as the years move on, and I have no faith in these types of cards.
There was the one from Core 21, Liliana Standard Bearer. The 3-mana 3/1 flash. When it comes into play, you draw a card for each creature you control that died this turn.
You tried that, right?
I think I put it in my cube, but then we never cubed, so it didn't matter.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, like so that is again 3-mana 3/1 flash. Stats are fine, even if you just want to play it end of turn. It's reasonable. If a creature trades, it's reasonable. You get to you can untap attack on your turn. If a creature dies, boom, get a card. The Foretell on this card is pretty scary. If you foretell this against any kind of control deck, the fact that it's an instant is very good. The fact that, and I think that's something I didn't bring up with the foretell cards earlier, that if it's an instant, you can foretell it on your turn and cast it on your opponent's turn, which is very important. So I can.
The thing that's interesting is it costs 1 black and it leave up 1 black. It's not 2. 2 is a lot of mana. 1 is reasonable.
Yeah, 1 is and it's fine even if they kill a guy or two. Getting 2/2s off of it is pretty great. I'm not sure, even if you're playing some sort of aristocrat strategy, like blam, you can set up a board, foretell this. Next turn, sack it to Wolfstrider and Pals, Rise of the Dreadmorn, rebuild the board, sack it again. If you're really deep into the aristocrats deck, I think this card is a really interesting. I don't know if it's a payoff, but it definitely helps enable that kind of deck, or protects you against wraths. I think this card is interesting enough to try, but I feel like I think when this card got spoiled, I was like, this card's sick. I'm jacked about this card in Commander. some kind of effect like that, that I always think that I'm going to get sick value off this. That doesn't really translate super well. It's going to make a million guys once for some person, and it's going to be a sick story, but I don't know how well. Like, the floor on this card is like you get a 2/2. The ceiling is the universe, you know what I mean? So the floor on this isn't good. The ceiling extremely high, but I feel like you're going to be a lot closer to the floor more often than not. So I think it's pretty hard to I guess gauge where exactly this card is going to land. But again, if you're really deep into the aristocrat strategy, being able to Rise of the Dreadmorn is just another payoff that you yourself can enable. You know, sack your board, make a better board. You know.
Well, the benefit of this is any creature. It doesn't have to be yours. So
Hmm.
if you get 2 guys, I think it's worth it.
Yeah. Like, hey, if you play this weird Dimir control deck, you can Damnation, Rise of the Dreadmorn. That is a little more niche than what we were talking about. I have to have a Wrath, and they have to have guys, and they have to have Rise of the Dreadmorn. But you can do it. So for red, this isn't. This was a card. Admittedly, I wasn't going to talk about it first, but it's Dragonkin Berserker. 1 in a red, 2/2 Human Berserker. First strike. Boast abilities you activate cost 1 less for each dragon you control. Boast, 4 in a red. Create a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying. So this thing's a Goblin Piker. That might make you a 5/5. Who knows? No.
The obvious comparison is Ether Chaser, probably. Similar stat.
Yeah, 2
Comes
mana,
down
2/2.
first strike.
2/1? 2/2?
2/1.
2/1 first strike. Comes into play, you make 2 energy. Whenever it attacks, you may pay 2 energy to make a 1/1 servo. Right?
That's about right, yeah.
Yeah. This guy's swinging for the, I don't know baseball terms. Swinging for the home run place. This guy's making 5/5s. I think there's another uncommon in the set. I think it's 2 mana, 2/1 boast, pay 3 mana, make it 2/1. That I think is probably a little more. That one's just a fair version of this card. You know, the 2 mana 2/2 first strike. It's going to be able to attack at least okay early, maybe even eat up 2 blocks later, and then if you happen to be at the end of your curve, pumping 5 mana into this thing isn't terrible. 2 drops in red have gotten a lot better in the last however many years. So my Goblin Piker that will more often than not never activate, I'm not super jacked about, but the fact that it's a 2-drop that is like, okay, it's pretty okay at 2, but pretty great at 10. It's a Goblin Piker that, because this doesn't have to live through combat, you can just send it in the die and make a 5/5. 7 mana and 2 turns for this. Not a great value. I'm obviously not trying to sell you on Dragonkin Berserker very hard. I do think it's one of the more interesting boast cards that they printed, but it just won't activate very often. At least Eradicator Valkyrie, great stats, has evasion, easy to activate, no problem. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what world I'd have to be in. There's like, even if you have a dragon or 2 in play, like sure. But if you already have a couple dragons in play, game probably over. It's probably okay for you. All right, and the red card I'm actually excited about, which is kind of boring, is Goldspan Dragon. 3 red, 4/4 dragon, flying haste. When Goldspan Dragon attacks or becomes the target of a spell, create a treasure token. Treasure tokens you control have tapped. Sacrifice an artifact, add 2 mana of any 1 color to your mana pool.
So I got to stop you before you say anything.
Sure.
And I know you're a big fan of Mardu Dragons. You're a big fan of treasure tokens. So this does everything that you like in one package.
It does. It's still Glorybringer. I'm still convinced that my favorite dragon at 5 is Glorybringer. Huge fan of that card. Everything about it. Design, art, mechanic, you name it. Everything I want. In my big Rakdos machine decks. Goldspan Dragon is pretty close. So the argument you make for this card is it costs 3 mana, 4 mana, 4/4 flying haste. You get the token pretty much regardless. If they try to kill it, you get it. You get the treasure. You get some sort of rebate back on it. Kind of no matter what. Let's say Icy Manipulator it. So you're gonna get the rebate pretty often. And these 4 mana or 5 mana 4/4 flying dragons are all typically good They all see some amount of play generally. But there's now so many of them. Which ones do you play? My favorite one, and I'm gonna say is my favorite one is Glorybringer, obviously. I like it more than Thundermaw Hellkite. Thundermaw Hellkite has been the kind of de facto best 5 for a long time. And I do think it's the best at making someone dead. Sure, it kills them in 4 turns. The other ones don't. But very rarely is it just I only need my creature to kill somebody in 4. You know what I mean? Like I want my cards to be a little more a little more than one dimension. Thundermaw Dragon kills people dead the fastest. Not arguing that. But what Glorybringer does, again, it's good in the aggressive decks. It's good in the control decks. It kind of does both. So where does Goldspan Dragon fit? Goldspan Dragon lets you play it, attack, and then follow it up with something. The problem is in traditional aggressive decks, there's not a lot of follow-up other than maybe the last burn spell in your hand, which might be enough. In mid-range decks, however, the extra mana is going to help you. Gonna help you pay for something. But the place that I've been the most impressed with, at least in standard, has been the control decks. It puts your opponent on a pretty fast clock while it lets you keep up the very important 2 mana, like we discussed earlier. 2 mana, blue gets to do a lot of things. Bounce things, counter things. That's kind of it. But those are very good.
Cards? Behold the Multiverse.
Behold the Multiverse, you know? Saw it coming. Behold the Multiverse. You know, all these foretell cards we talked about. So, I don't think this is better than Thundermaw. I don't think it's better than Glorybringer. I think it's an interesting choice. But I'm not sure what home fits.
So I'm going to try it over Thundermaw. It's probably not the right choice, but we're going to do it anyways when we eventually cube.
Yeah. Again, I do think Thundermaw is a good card. I'm not saying it's not, but it's very one-dimensional. It does one thing. Glorybringer, Goldspan Dragon, Stormbreath Dragon, all of those dragons do something else. They have another angle of attack. And I will more often pick those kind of cards over the very generic Thundermaw Hellkite. As a comparison. So that's my case for Goldspan Dragon. I do like the card. I do think it's the third-ish best version of this card. But I've been very impressed. At least with how it happens to play in the blue decks right now. Again, Saw It Coming, Behold the Multiverse, Essence Scatter, Brazen Boar are all cards in standard. All cost 2. So when you attack with Goldspan Dragon, you have a hard counter up, bounce spell up. So many options. So Goldspan Dragon just slots into that real well. So we're finally in the green, and we're going to talk about maybe one of the most boring mythics I've seen in a while. And that is Battle Mammoth. 3 green, 6/5 trample. Whenever a permanent you control becomes... it's an elephant. Very important, the elephant. You know, if you didn't know. Whenever a permanent you control becomes a target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card. Foretell for 2 green. Maybe I think this card is really boring because it was one of the first... I think it was the first Foretell card.
I think it was the first one, yeah.
But yeah, green just draws as many... all the cards. Green gets as many cards as they want.
I think my main problem with this card and why I'm not putting it in right now is similar to... what was the 5-drop we got a little while ago?
Which one?
The 6/6, and on attack you can make it 3/3.
Elder Gargaroth.
Yeah, like cards like that. I'm not sure if I'm on board with my particular list because it's almost all upside once they're in play. They're like snowbally planeswalker style creatures, and I'm not sure I want to lean hard into that. I'm still very much a traditionalist when it comes to I like creature combat, I like decisions. This thing's like I'm just gonna jam this thing, and if it dies, great, and or if it lives, they're dead.
So Elder Gargaroth, I think is an interesting point because I think that card is a good example of how many cards can we give this slow card. We're gonna give as many abilities to this card that has to wait a full turn to be good. How many abilities do we have to staple on it to make it good? And Elder Gargaroth thing is right at the line. I think it has trample. It makes a 3/3 or draws a card or gains 3 life randomly. I'm really curious how many times I thought that card's gained life. But it has to attack to do it. Battle Mammoth, a little different. Again, at 5 mana 6/5 or 4 mana 6/5, depending if you foretell it, which is very easy to do in green. It's pretty easy to find 2 mana to foretell it later. But even again, 5 mana 6/5 trample, not a terrible rate. This card I like a little more because it kind of does something for sure most of the time. If that makes sense. So like Drew said, traditionally you want your 5, 6 these amount of mana cards to kind of generate something for you now. I want something right away. I don't want to play Elder Gargaroth into a Doomblade. I'm going to feel like a doofus. Battle Mammoth, beyond playing it into a Wrath, which is part of the game, it's most likely going to get you something. So this card, I don't think is quite like Elder Gargaroth. I do think Elder Gargaroth, if he gets the chance to let loose, that card is going to snowball. This card's going to probably just eat the first possible removal spell your opponent's going to have and replace itself. Yeah. I think this card is very unexciting. I think I'm going to like it probably more than Elder Gargaroth most of the time, just because I just assume when I'm paying 5 or 6 for a creature, the chance of it getting to attack, unless it has haste, aren't the highest. So I like it being able to target, protect my team, and even if I play it into an immediate answer, I get something back right away. Elder Gargaroth and that kind of card is going to snowball more, obviously generate more card advantage. That card has to attack twice to presumably get more value than this card's going to get, which is a pretty big ask over 3 turns. So I think comparing them isn't that bad. But that's kind of how I evaluate this card. It's not very flashy. It's a fairly fine statted card. It's a green card. It has trample, draws you cards, because every green card draws you cards nowadays for some reason. But yeah, I do like this card, as boring as it is. I am not excited to try to find space for it, because it doesn't do
green
anything.
5s are very deep.
Yeah, this card doesn't do anything I want in a particular deck. It's just a fine card, a fine creature with a reasonable ability that'll just shoehorn into something. It isn't the reason why I want to play green. It doesn't fit into an archetype I necessarily want. It is just fine. And that's not really the kind of cards I'm looking to add. A little more exciting, a little more play to them. Battle Mammoth, I'm sure if you try it, will be perfectly reasonable, but reasonably boring. Which isn't bad. And I say boring a lot to describe cards, but it isn't. I don't mean that in a negative way. Just because a card is boring does not equal a card is bad by any means.
Like one-dimensional, right? It comes down and attacks. That's all it does.
Thunderbolt Hellkite is boring. Very good, but boring. All right. Vorinclex, a Monstrous Raider. I did not know that was the name of this card. I thought it was Monsters Raid. I bought this card a lot over the weekend, too. You think I would have read it once. Vorinclex, Monstrous Raider. 4 green. 6/6 Phyrexian Predator. Trample haste. If you would put one or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many counters of each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player instead. If an opponent would put one or more counters on a permanent or player, put half that many counters of each of those permanents instead, rounded down. So if they get 1, they get 0. Okay. Vorinclex, baby. This card is a lot of text. How much of it is relevant? Up to discussion. 6 mana, 6/6 trample haste. We've talked in the past that green 6s are shallower than they should be, considering how old. I don't know. It's one of the shallower things that green has, considering how strong the color is in general. For a long time, it kind of was just prime time and painting Baloths. There wasn't a whole lot of other surrounding cast. So we've got a couple more, some Koglas, a couple other options. So Vorinclex hits, and he hits hard. 6 mana, 6/6 trample haste. There's not a lot. There's a lot of there. It has a lot of text. Has a lot of abilities. The rest of the card, though, how much does it? How relevant is it?
You could alt your planeswalkers right away, I guess.
You can alt your planeswalkers right away. This card looks like a card designed for Commander, obviously. It even interacts with Infect. They get double the amount of Infect counters. But I think when I first saw this card, my initial reaction, at least for Standard, was like, oh, this card's just like a flashy Commander card that probably won't be as good as I think it's going to be in Standard. I was pretty wrong. It turns out 6 mana, 6/6 trample haste is a perfectly fine rate. Again, the card hits very fast. If you don't deal with it right away, it's going to be a problem. And it's typically getting in the first combat free. The second abilities the Planeswalker ability comes up a lot more than I think it does, or I thought it would. I should say. Obviously, in Cube, where you have to play Green X, there's a lot of the Green Planeswalkers that if you get after you play Vorinclex, you can assault them right away, and that's great. But obviously, you want to lean into other colors, and it makes Planeswalkers a little more interesting. Not that they really needed any help, but especially if you don't have a Planeswalker cap on your cube, or you don't limit any arbitrary amount of Planeswalkers, this text is I think is very very relevant. But it does make the best card type in cube better. Not that they need a ton of help. But yeah, I thought at face value it was going to be not super relevant, but it comes up a lot more than I thought it would.
I'm a known hater of Primeval Titan. I keep calling it like Colossal Dreadmaw, basically, because I don't think the land fetching situation is very relevant in Cube. Well, it's like a numbers math game.
Sure.
But it's a must-answer card. This thing's going to kill you fast, right?
Oh yeah,
and Green has a lot of cards like this, kind of like coming down the pipe, and I'm leaning towards not including it right now, currently, because
it's also very expensive.
Like you said, it's very aggressively costed. It's going to come down. You got to kill it like now, or you take 2 hits from this thing, you're dead. You're probably dead, right? And I don't know if how much of that I want to inject into my list, but yeah, it's a Cube is as it is for everyone for your playgroup, and if playgroup wants to try it, sure.
Yeah, I think that the rest of the text outside of Trample and Haste are a lot more relevant than I thought it was going to be for sure. And I think this card easily slots into a majority of cubes. Green isn't that deep, even if it was a little deeper. I still think Vorinclex is in the conversation. The card is very powerful. It does create a very have to deal with problem right away. And again, it interacts with it creates big stories and these other things just with its ability. It nerfs your opponent's planeswalkers. It completely annihilates sagas if sagas mad if you play a lot of sagas, you know. But I'm sure there are a lot of other cards as effects that you probably don't think of right away. Just in your cube. So I think this card again is a pretty easy add. I can't imagine this card's gonna let you down. But if you want the like premium ones, oh baby, they're expensive. At least on
Phyrexian text ones.
Yeah. On release day, I think we changed our foil Phyrexian price to 300 Canadian. And we sold some at that price. Which is kind of wild. Which I personally prefer the showcase version. But I understand the Phyrexian one is so unique. As much as I like the showcase art, I think the showcase art is super badass for this card. But the Phyrexian language, like the only other comparison is the Judge Elishnorn, which is like worth an absurd amount of money too. So yeah, it's like super cool. This Wizards obviously knew what they were doing with this card. They had to design this card to be fucking awesome. And again, I don't know why it put it in this order, but the next card we have is Esika's Chariot. 3 green. So we went from like super exciting to a bunch of cats. 3 green. 4/4. Legendary artifact vehicle. When Esika's Chariot enters the battlefield, create 2/2/2 green cat creature tokens. Whenever Esika's Chariot attacks, create a token that's a copy of target token you control, crew 4. That was harder than it should have been. The tokens that this card makes is fantastic. They're actually awesome looking.
What do you mean not exciting? Ooh, big fan. This was one of the cards that when I read the set later, I was like, oh, wait a minute. This card is amazing. I'm in.
I think it's better, for sure better. When I first read this card, I immediately dismissed it as some sort of whatever. But this card is definitely better than I thought it was. So 4 mana, you get 2/2/2s. Adorable looking cat tokens. And then it accrues itself if you need to. It creates other tokens. It can create more 2/2s that you just use to accrue itself to kind of replicate the more and more cats. I'm not sure what the flavor is of this chariot going around and just picking up a bunch of cats. But this card is
place to be.
I think this card for your upfront price, you're gonna get. I think it's kind of gonna go a ways for you. I think it's gonna be hard to be unhappy with how this card plays. Like it looks kind of. I don't even know. I want to say this looks unexciting at face value, but it has a lot of things. It does a lot of things. It spits out a lot of things. Kind of like what's it? Enchanted Carriage from Throne of Eldraine. The like pumpkin vehicle that makes a bunch of rats, like the Cinderella story. Bunch of rat homies get into the thing and crew the pumpkin at you. this one isn't in the Cinderella story, but still pretty sweet. Makes a bunch
Well, if
of
you want a
chunky cats.
story, you can copy a fractured identity token.
Yeah, that's the pipe dream. Again, fractured identity not a card that needs any help, but I can have 2 of your opponent's best things and some cat tokens.
And some cat tokens.
Yeah, again, I think this card will play better than it reads. I know this guy. I've played with and played against this card a little bit, and again, this card definitely impressed me when it was played against me for sure. I don't know when my opponent played it. I was like, man, there's a lot of things going on all of a sudden, and I can't kill it. I can't block it super great, so it's just gonna keep becoming a problem. So yeah, I do think this card is interesting. I'm not sure exactly what power level I want it at. 4 green is there's a lot of stuff in the 4 mana green section, but it is a 4 mana green card that isn't a creature. There's not very many of those, so
true.
So that's good. Chariot's pretty cool. I like that they're just putting vehicles in every set, or in a lot of sets, I should say. Since that flavor wise,
it's safer equipment, right?
Yeah,
it's hard to make good equipment, and it's easy to make bad equipment. But vehicles, there's a lot more knobs to turn to make.
It looks like it,
just
yeah, absolutely.
Way better and constructed and limited.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely a fan. All right, I guess that brings us to our first gold card, if you want to call this a gold card. Valki, God of Lies. Like I said when we talked about black cards, this card's going to be a black card more often than not, but just in case, here we are. Valki, God of Lies, 1 in a black, 2/1, legendary creature god. When Valki enters the battlefield, each opponent reveals their hand. For each opponent to exile a creature card, they reveal this way until Valki leaves the battlefield. Pay X. Choose a creature card exiled with Valki with converted mana cost X. Valki becomes a copy of that card. And then the other side of it is Tybalt's Cosmic Imposter. Ooh, a surprise. 5 black-red. Legendary Planeswalker Tybalt has 5 Storing Loyalty. As Tybalt enters the battlefield, you get an emblem with you may play cards exiled with Tybalt Cosmic Imposter, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. +2, exile top card of each player's library. -3, exile target artifact or creature. -8, exile all cards from all graveyards. Add 3 red to your mana pool. Alright, let's start with Valki. Start with the front side again. I know when I read Tybalt first, I just auto-assumed this card was a commander card. Seeing 7 mana. But, Valki. Let me tell you about Valki. Valki's also pretty good. 2 mana, 2/1. Again, it comes into play. It doesn't freebooter your opponent. I guess it ostracizes, so you get to choose a creature and put it underneath Valki. And you become a copy of that creature. What do you think about Valki?
So, as I said, I'm a known hater of Primeval Titan. I'm also a known hater of Brain Maggots and those types of effects. But mostly I don't like them because they're 2 mana for an irrelevant 1/1. While 2/1s, 2 mana for a 2/1 is actually an acceptable rate.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, this has an ability where it can become better than that. But it's not as good as Brain Maggot, I guess, because you can only get creatures, right?
Yeah.
But I think the 2 power means it's always going to be a reliable guy. It doesn't even matter. You gain information from them, whether they have a creature or not. They will probably have one if you're playing this on turn 2. And it's just going to serve its role. But if it's late and they don't have a creature, you might be as Sandbag if you are, Splash of a Montana and can cast the Tybalt side.
Yeah, then we'll get the Tybalt conversation.
Yeah, I think I like it.
Yeah,
it's expensive. It's very hard to get a hold of one.
We definitely oversold this card. It's okay now, but this is definitely one of the biggest cards in the set, along with Vorinclex. So Valki, God of Lies, like you said, a lot of Brain Maggot effects. Have a pretty unappealing body. Freebooter is Kitesail Freebooter is the most appealing one because it also has 1 power, but it also has a very important keyword, flying. So you can steal your opponent's card. Not 2, but you get to steal your opponent's card and still attack because these cards typically sit in the creature decks. So the Valki is a 2 mana 2/1. It is a reasonable rate on its own. It takes your opponent's card, and then if it happens to be something bigger that you're going to spend the mana to. Like, what if I take your opponent's questing beast and I turn into a questing beast a couple turns later? Like, that's kind of a problem. I turn into Vorinclex, you know what I mean? You take a turn or two early, where the green decks kind of have a hard time dealing with these kind of cards. So, this card, I think, has a lot of play to it. Like, literally, worst case, it's a blocker in your more control deck. Best case, it's stealing something very relevant and copying. But the actual probably best case is Tybalt's Cosmic Imposter. So, Tybalt's pretty sweet. There's very little not to like. It costs a lot of mana. It scrolls up to a lot of loyalty. But it is really, really interesting that you get to play Valki just as this fine guy in your black X deck. And as long as you just have a red source kind of kicking around somewhere, you draw this 2-mana 2/1 late, all of a sudden you have a Planeswalker that's a problem for your opponent. So the best part about Tybalt is it comes into play, you get the emblem no matter what. It's as it comes into play, so you just get the emblem. It doesn't come into play, trigger, and then your opponent gets a chance to Hero's Downfall, right? To kill it right away with the trigger on the stack. You just get it. So you can then immediately -3 or +2 it to either kill your opponent's best creature or artifact that's causing you a problem, or just take the top card of your and your opponent's library. So you're getting value out of it regardless the turn you resolve it. It does cost a lot of mana, but at least it was designed in a way that you're getting something out of it. If your opponent doesn't deal with this card, it's a really big problem. It's drawing you 2 cards a turn, killing their best thing. You know, it threatens ultimate pretty fast. And again, like, once you exile all cards in graveyard, you can cast all those cards. It's a lot of cards you have access to. So the floor and ceiling of Valki / Tybalt is huge. The floor isn't very low, and the ceiling is the I don't know. I want to say, I'm trying to think of something really, really high. That is the universe. Very high. Very, very, very high. I think there's very little to not like about Valki other than his price tag. Yeah. I know we talk about this card a lot of work, and I think people are saying, like, yeah, like, if there was this, because the stupid way Cascade works, if you play Cascade in your cube for some reason, you can Cascade into Valki and cast Tybalt, because Magic's kind of dumb. It shouldn't work that way, but it kind of does. So,
yeah, you think it would work like split cards where it adds the cost together? Like,
yeah, I really would like them to change that rule. Not that it affects me because I don't play those formats, but it's weird. So again, there's very little not to like. You get this perfectly reasonable creature at face value that has this, like, huge payoff of, like, I can, sometimes I can sneak their best guy, sometimes I can turn to Tybalt. Got a lot of options, a lot of like. Again, except for maybe the price tag. The next card we're going to talk about is a little more interesting. Maybe not interesting, maybe weird is better, because I think Tybalt's super interesting. Is Esika, God of the Tree. There's 1 green for a 1/4 legendary creature god. This is Vigilance. Taps to add 1 mana to 1 mana of any color in your mana pool, and other legendary creatures you control have Vigilance and tap. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. And then it transforms into the Prismatic Bridge, which is 1 of every color, so white, blue, black, red, green. Legendary enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal cards on top of your library until you reveal a creature or planeswalker card. Put that card into the battlefield and the rest of the bottom of your library in any order. So I want to talk about this card quickly. I'm going to start with the bridge this time. I don't think this card is necessarily a huge standout that everyone's clamoring to jam in their cube. But I know in the past couple of years, the 5-color strategy, the 5-color cards, like Nimbus Reborn, Golos, Kenrith pile, has been a little more popular lately, especially Golos. And I think it's a lot of it has to do with the online cubes. Those are, like, pretty big features. A lot of the bigger content creators just like jamming that because it's pretty fun. It's fun to play. It's fun to watch. It's fun to draft. So it's just kind of gaining more and more traction. So Prismatic Bridge is, again, deeper down that rabbit hole of, I can play this Esika, this 3-mana 1/4 Birds of Paradise, if I need a blocker, or I get to just jam this pseudo Oath of Druids effect that cheats into play a planeswalker creature every single turn. Do I think this card is just good enough based on power? No, probably not. The card's too slow, probably. But the card's super interesting, and if you go deep down that, like, prismatic rabbit hole, I think this card's another card that's maybe worth trying.
Yeah, I've read this card a lot, and I realize it's a 1/4 now. For some reason, I had 2/3 in my mind. I don't know what card that costs 1 green that taps for a mana that is
I don't
legendary.
know.
That I don't know, but it's a 1/4. That's better. It's much better. That's a 1/4.
Yeah, like it's not the mana guy you're trying to grab for your traditional green deck. But again, if you're in a pinch in those like multicolor decks, you can just jam this 3 mana 1/4. The body's fine. 1 green might be tough in your multicolor deck, but again, the body's fine. It has vigilance, which is I don't know, can attack for 1 and then add a mana. But
Could randomly give you other guys mana
I
abilities.
don't know how many
and
other guys.
vigilance. Vigilance is a
And
thing.
it also gives them vigilance. So again, I'm not trying to sell you on Esika, but if you're really deep into the Niv Mizzet Golos Kenrith, maybe look at the bridge. Cheating out those cards is pretty good too. Another card I want to talk about pretty quickly is Immursturm Predator. So Immursturm Predator is 2 black-red, 3/3 Vampire Dragon. Flying, whenever Immursturm Predator becomes tapped, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard and put a +1/+1 counter on Immursturm Predator. Sacrifice another creature. Immursturm Predator gains indestructible and until end of turn, tap it.
I'm gonna have to stop you there and say it's Immursturm.
It is Immursturm, not Immursturm. Immursturm Predator. So whenever it becomes tapped, exile a card from a graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on it. You can sacrifice a creature to give it indestructible and tap it to again activate its ability to give itself a +1/+1 counter. If you are very deep into the Aristocrat strategy, I think this card is just a worse Falkenrath Aristocrat, but will become more indestructible more often. Humans are very common. Aristocrat can become indestructible very easily. Wait, is it only human that's indestructible? Why do I think it's human? Human gives it a +1/+1
Falkenrath
counter,
only
right?
gets the counter if it's +1/+1 if it's a human, but it
Right.
always gains indestructible.
So Falkenrath and this card gain indestructible just as much. This card will most likely outgrow it, but again, it's just an
It
option.
also starts off smaller.
If you're really deep into the Aristocrat strategy, I do think it is worse than Falkenrath. Rakdos cards are kind of shallow. If you just want just Rakdos cards, like more aggressive cards, Rakdos has a ton of Rakdos Return, Planeswalkers that are good black-red X cards, typically control mid-range cards, but are not good Rakdos cards. And Immursturm Predator is kind of Falkenrath Aristocrat-esque, where it's going to be very good. This one more so in the more Aristocrats build. Kind of hard to deal with, has evasion, slower, but again, just a different option. So the next card we're going to talk about is Niko Aris, the first Planeswalker we're talking about. It costs X white blue. Legendary Planeswalker Niko. It has 3 starting loyalty. And when Niko Aris enters the battlefield, create X shard tokens. What are shard tokens? Shard tokens are upgraded clues. Shard tokens are enchantments with pay 2, sacrifice this enchantment, scry 1, draw a card. So their first ability is +1. Up to 1 target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. Whenever that creature deals damage this turn, return it to its owner's hand. -1. Niko deals 2 damage to target tapped creature for each card you've drawn this turn. -1. Create a shard token.
Very safe.
Very safe.
That's all I can think of when I see this card. Like, and then there's nothing after many a year and a half, 2 years of let's pay 3 mana for a 6 loyalty planeswalker. This is 6 mana for a 3 mana planeswalker or 3 loyalty planeswalker, and the abilities up and down are very, modest. I guess +1, -1.
So if you play nothing into X, just comes into play. You don't get any upfront ability. It can make one of your creatures unblockable, which isn't necessarily an ability you're looking for in blue-white, especially in a blue-white card. It's kind of weird, and then it bounces into your hand. Again, kind of weird.
Yeah, if you pay 3 mana for this to make your 2-drop unblockable, and then you're just reverse tempoing yourself, it's probably not a great line.
I guess you can buy back Muldrifters and stuff. There are lines that make this card interesting, but it's definitely not your typical blue-white card. The deal 2 damage to target tapped creature for each card you draw on this turn is also kind of difficult. I think your best case is your opponent has a 2-drop and attacked you. You want to tap, play your 3rd land, play Niko, shock their thing that attacked you. Probably the best case, but probably also doesn't happen that often. And then -1, create a shard token. That ability is actually not terrible. It's -1, make a clue, a better clue. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
I don't know how to play with this card. I do think this is the card that you have to play with a little more to kind of understand exactly what you're trying to get out of it. At least in traditional cube, it's really hard to slot this in. Blue white is one of the best guilds by like a pretty wide margin. They have also like some of the best planeswalker options by a pretty wide margin. This card doesn't really fit into anything I can think of, at least off the top of my head, super well. Very interesting.
Enchantress. Come on now.
Shards are cool. Doesn't make artifacts, which is maybe more abusable, or for sure more abusable. But yeah, I don't know where this card fits, to be honest. I do wish I'd played this card a little more before we got to talk about it, but I'm really just not sure where this card settles, unfortunately. And again, not all Planeswalkers have to be, insane. That's okay. They don't all have to cost 3 mana and start at 6 loyalty. What will?
I much prefer the more niche planeswalkers that have a role to play. I will almost always try and give those a second or third look.
Yeah, no,
like
that's fair. Absolutely.
Over the generically strong ones like Oko. Like this thing is good
Oko's,
at everything.
Oko's a bit of a mess. So that brings us to our next planeswalker. Kaya the Inexorable. 3 white black. 5 starting loyalty. Legendary planeswalker Kaya. +1. Put a ghost form counter on up to 1 target non-token creature. It gains whenever this creature dies or is put into exile. Return it to his owner's hand. Create a 1/1 white spirit token with flying. -3. Exile target online permanent. Not bad. -7. You get an emblem with. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may cast a legendary spell from your hand, your graveyard, or your hand from your graveyard, or from among cards you own in exile without paying its mana cost. This is very on brand for Kaya as a character in the Magic storyline. So you get to throw in another Orzhov Planeswalkers into the pile of Orzhov Planeswalkers that exist. That aren't Sorens, so that's nice.
This one plays it safe in regards to it's 5 mana for a 5 loyalty. I'm sure we've seen that a lot. I know we have. It's got a relatively on brand +1 or plus ability, and the -3 exile or kill something is on a lot of walkers that have these very similar stated abilities.
But
might
this
be
one
the
is
best
any
version.
permanent, yeah.
Yeah, it's any permanent.
Permanent is very, very strong.
Non-land.
Or non-land permanent.
Yeah.
But still.
Yeah, it's the best version of that -3 that we have on any of the similar types of planeswalkers. So.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the minus. Do we ever get to do the minus?
The ultimate's kind of weird. I don't know. Again, there are a lot of cards that are planeswalkers. Our planeswalkers are legendary. Planeswalkers happen to be all legendary. There's a lot of creatures nowadays that are fairly pushed that are legendary, but I don't think that's the ultimate isn't the reason why we're playing this card necessarily. Typically when you add a planeswalker to cube, unless it can ultimate the following turn, you're really not kind of evaluating it based off that. It's how much mileage you're going to get from the first 2 abilities. This card does protect itself. It does kill a thing. It can kill anything that isn't a land, which is pretty powerful. Which is I'm happy to see more on planeswalkers or these kind of cards that you're paying a fairly reasonable cost for. Being able to like Obnixilis the Black Oath or Obnixilis Reignited, I think is the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
That one only destroys a creature. The fact that this thing can kill enemy planeswalkers, other problematic permanents that aren't just creatures, is great. Big fan of that. Big fan of that upgrade. But its +1 is where it gets kind of interesting. The fact that it kind of protects itself in one of 2 ways. It exiles 1 threat from attacking it, leaving it a 2 loyalty, or it protects another thing you have. But it kind of does double duty. Not only does it protect that thing from getting messed with, unless it gets bounced. That's bad. You don't want to get bounced. But if it dies or gets exiled, it then makes another thing to block. So it's kind of hard to get into this thing, but at the same time, if it's just sitting there ticking away, I'm not sure. At least at rate away, it doesn't create an immediate problem for me, if that makes sense. Or at least a sense of maybe not a huge sense of urgency to deal with this card. Not to undervalue its exile target non-land permanent. I do think that is the selling feature of this card. Again, Orzhov is another.
The most exciting part of this card is the 1/1 Spirit. I think that's underrated. Just reading it and imagining how this plays out, I think that's going to be way more relevant than most of the other abilities on this card.
I do think this card plays better than it looks. The +1 plays better than it looks, but I think again, I just at face value, people will add this card for its minus ability. But I do think there's more weight in its plus ability than there, or it just is. I think it's a more powerful ability. I'm not sure where this fits in the world of Orzhov cards. Orzhov is another color pairing that has a lot of options, even a lot of Planeswalker options. A lot of the Sorens kind of do similar effects, but they're all pretty efficient. They all make guys, make your creatures a little better, gain you life, do some amount of variant. Kaya is a nice change from that. I think at 5 mana, it's maybe a big ask for what I wanted to do. Again, I think without seeing this card in play, or let's say I'm sitting down for Cube for the first time, without having experience playing Kaya, it's not the kind of card that I'm jumping to try out. But I do think this card plays and makes interesting board states that otherwise wouldn't exist. I do think it makes kind of unique gameplay that other Planeswalkers cannot do because of its, again, fairly unique plus ability that Kaya's ghost forms things, which is pretty interesting. I don't think this card is kind of clamoring to be in my cube to fit a role or to play to fit in an archetype or whatever. It is kind of just generically good, which is fine. There's like it's not a nod against it or a strike against, but I'm not sure what I would cut for. I guess is where I'm at. Like, I guess I can cut a Sorin, one of the various Sorins anybody's playing. Again, Sorin fits the black-white decks pretty well. You know, it kind of plays ball with their kind of more aggressive side. Makes tokens, gains you life, does a couple things, depending which version of Sorin you play. And this one does, just does it at a different angle. More mid-rangey, where the Sorins are typically really more scrappy, more relevant to, like, your kind of go-wide, shittier, wiener black creatures to come back a lot and, kind of, fight it on the ground. So Kaya's, again, just a different angle. I do think there's a lot of power in her possibility, but yeah, I guess I'm not sure. I don't know. The little bit I've played it, I've been fairly happy with it. I've never had to play it or drawn it or been in a situation where I've ever been sad to play it. But I guess
exile card. Yeah. It's pretty good.
You're always getting your value out of it. You know what I mean? It feels really, really difficult to not get your value out of it, which I guess is good considering it costs 5 mana. I don't know. I do like this card again, but I'm not sure where I would rank it in terms of Orzhov cards. Alright, so this is kind of just, we didn't talk about this in Zendikar Rising, which is good, because now it's an easier conversation to have when all 10 exist. And that is the pathways. So Blightstep Pathways is the one I've arbitrarily chosen, just because it's from Kaldheim. But this is kind of a conversation about all the pathways, because we didn't have this conversation in Zendikar Rising. Now that we have all 10, where do you put these cards, Drew?
Me personally, because I've thought about it, like, it's been 5 months, right, since
it's been
the
a while.
Pathways originally came out. I particularly don't like them above most of the other choices we have, and I think if you're talking either from a gameplay perspective or even a budgetary perspective, I like the checklands better, like Dragonskull Summit, because I think those actually serve the purpose of fixing, while this Pathways have the problem of, while they come into play untapped, only fix your mana once and don't solve your problem down the road. So I think I'd rank them, if I had a whole bunch of them, like excluding the obvious ones like duels and stuff, like maybe like 5th or 6th under the checklands. There's like Painlands as well. I think I like the Painlands more.
So in my modern cube, just as I guess as a reference, so I play Shockland, Fetchland, Checkland. Those are kind of like the first 3 that I was quick to add. The next line after that kind of just ended up being Manlands in a lot of the cases, at least in the allied colors. And then some of the Horizon lands are, and then I think mostly Horizon lands from that point. So that's kind of it. I don't know where the pathways land after that. Like, I like them. I think there's definitely been a world where I play the Scars lands, like the fast lands. I've played those in a bunch of different cubes in my life, and I've been overall happy with them, assuming they're in the color pairing that I want them in. Typically, red white.
I've extensively tried those out, and I was really on high, I guess on a high with them when I originally tried them out, and over time I just got more and more despondent with them. In that,
Yeah,
well, yeah, they're good in one turn to three, and then you're it's the aggro's deck's turning point, and you have your like Falconwrath Aristocrat because we talked about that card already, and you have this you top deck this land, and it comes into play tapped because it's the fourth land. And you're like, this is the last time this is happening to me. These things are getting cut, you know.
so yeah, the Scars lands obviously are more tailored towards the aggressive colors. I don't really care. Um, I don't really need Razor Verge Thicket in my wait, not Razor Verge Thicket. Seachrome Coast in my blue white deck. Like obviously blue white also wants their lands on tap, but they also would rather have a Celestial Colonnade. Taking the turn off, turn 1 or maybe even turn 2 isn't as backbreaking to the control decks as it is the aggro decks. The aggro decks need to 1, 2, 3, 4, you know what I mean? Or to be as consistent as possible through their curve being able to cast their spells. So the Scars lands or Pain lands were the lands that you played towards those colors. Pain lands were kind of the unfun option. You know, people don't really like taking damage to their own lands. So fast lands, Scars lands, Kaladesh lands, whatever you want to call them, became the replacement, you know, the tryout for a lot of people. And they were fine. Again, there's a lot of feel bads when you need your turn 4 land or turn 5 or whatever it is, or that the Pain lands or Scars lands favor the aggressive decks a lot more than the control decks, where like my control deck doesn't really. Again, my blue white deck doesn't necessarily want to play Seachrome Coast. It's fine, but it's not necessarily the card I'm looking for. But the blue white decks also don't want to play a Dark Art Wastes, right? They want to tap the lands pretty frequently. They don't want to take damage with their spells, especially if you're playing a control deck. So I think the pathways I like them because it's coming into play untapped no matter what. It's going to give you the color you need right then and there, no matter what. I think I like them more than the Scars lands. Just like as a general term. If I want to play all
but there's
10,
only 5 of those.
Sorry? Yeah. 6. 6? No, there's 10. There's 10 now. There was the Kaladesh ones and then the Scars ones. So it's all 10 exist.
I was already off off the train by that point, so I forgot.
Yeah, because like Blackcleave Cliffs was like the de facto one for a long time. That or Sulphur Springs. So if I like as a whole, if I want to play all 10 of a land cycle, I do like the pathways. Like you know, Drew said, it doesn't solve you know all of your mana problems if you're playing a 3-color deck right away. It does only give you the one, but the fact that it's always untapped, it's always the color you want that in there, I think it is very appealing. Again, assuming there's a hierarchy of dual land, shock land, fetch land, not necessarily in that order, probably in that order actually. I do really like dual shock fetch. Sorry, I do really like check lands like the Sunpetal Groves, that kind of stuff. But then like the Horizon lands, which there isn't a complete cycle for, unfortunately. There's only the enemy ones and Horizon Canopy, and then there's this. So if you are the type of person who wants to play all 10, I can't imagine being unhappy with the pathways. Being worse than the best lands in Magic isn't necessarily a knock against them. I know not everyone likes playing Pain lands, so I do like these as an option quite a bit. Again, I do value being in play untapped all the time is very, very important. Yeah, I don't know. I think in the handful I've played these cards, I've been very happy. There's been very little, oh, why didn't I, you know, other than me misclicking, why didn't I play this card as a mountain instead of a swamp, you know? It's what I needed then and there, and I've been pretty happy about it every time. So, I don't know. I think the potential feel bads of me wishing I could have played it as the other side versus me needing it to come into play untapped isn't nearly as bad. You know, I would rather have the pathways, I think, than the fast lands. But then again, I'm not sure if I would rather have the pathways versus the Pain lands. Again, it kind of comes down to your personal preference. I think if I were to put my cube back together right away, I would for sure be trying the pathways just as an overall experiment to see how people like them in general. But again, there's like it's all likely to have a huge downfall. I feel like Pain lands have a drawback, Scars lands have a drawback, Tap Man lands have a drawback. In my head, I don't see this so much as a drawback, and maybe that's why why I rank them so high. Because obviously Drew doesn't like the fact that, you know, I missed the opportunity to get both. Like I would take the risk of taking damage or take the risk of it coming to play tapped for me to have both colors. And
this one needs play testing, right? Like you have to see how they play out on average in your list.
I think they're gonna all play well, to be honest. I think it's kind of whatever you and your playgroup want more. Again, if you're okay playing, if you're playing a little slower Magic, then the tap lands are fine. If you're playing a lot faster Magic, pain lands, fast lands, these lands are probably going to be more up your alley. Even check lands like Secret, or not Secret Coast, Drown Catacombs and stuff, like maybe that's even too slow and you need to have a pathway turn 1 to have the color you need for sure. So it's going to come down a lot to, the makeup of your cube and ultimately how your playgroup likes playing them. Again, I can't imagine a world where you're going to put these in your cube and be unhappy with them, especially now that there's all 10. It was really awkward. There's only 6. We, again, fortunately just got to avoid that conversation. Oh. So I think that's it. Obviously, these things always end up being way longer than I want them to be.
Yeah.
100% of the time. But, it's fun, once you start talking about these things. We haven't done it in a long time to be able to talk about them again. Like I said, we're going to talk about snow in an entirely different episode, which should be coming out around shortly after this episode, or as close to as whenever it gets edited. But I'm not going to make any promises of how often we plan to do this. I know I have a couple things in the works. I do want to at least do this regularly with sets, which is pretty often nowadays because it feels like this is a set every other month. So this isn't, this isn't we're going to be back next week, but this isn't we'll see in a year either. We're looking for, any feedback you guys have. This is kind of an experiment still. We moved to this kind of system, obviously, during the pandemic. We can't get together in person. Also, the studio we used to record in is now completely demolished. It is no longer existent and is now my office at work. Office. Closet. So, that just doesn't exist. So, right before the pandemic, actually, I was building a studio set, if you will, in my apartment because I have extra space in my room. Because I feel like my bedroom is gigantic and I just don't use enough space. So I was gonna build a set, and that kind of got kiboshed along with a lot of people's plans during the pandemic. So while we still have the means to do it, we're probably not going to be doing it in a regular, using that outlet for the foreseeable future. So this is kind of the only way for us to do it. I know since the last time we've done it, Drew's gotten a better camera. Lighting could use some work, but his camera is now consistent instead of really choppy. I'm going to give him
more than 2 frames per second.
Yeah, more than 2 frames. I'm going to give him one of my old microphones that I have. I recently upgraded mine, so I can give him my old one. And then, I got some lights lying around. Maybe I'll give Drew a light. Who knows? So this is kind of the world we'll be making this in, which is pretty easy for us to do. Obviously, we're just sitting in our homes via Discord talking about this. So if you have any input or suggestions, we're more than happy to hear it. Again, we're kind of pseudo sticking to set reviews at the moment, but if there's any kind of general topics that we feel like we want to talk about, we might tackle those too. But we don't want to make any promises because we're really, really bad at keeping promises. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with Kaldheim. At least as a set in general, it's hard to say for Cube. Not cubing that much. It's really hard to say.
Yeah, I really want to buy more cards, and this is certainly feeding into that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Whether I could play with them or not.
Yeah, like at the beginning of the pandemic, we were definitely talking about, will it be open in 3 months? Who knows? And then actually 2020 was a great year for Magic, great year for Magic. Sales-wise, it was a great year for Magic. Wizards came out with a thing not long ago or Hipsters of the Coast did that. It was one of the best years for Magic, Numbers-wise, it sold very well. I'm really curious where they get their player data of like how many players are playing the game, but Commander's wild. Like the fact that Magic can succeed as a game. I don't want to say exclusively on the back of Commander, but is how strong Commander is as a format that Magic is where it is today because it is able to succeed today because of it. I feel like the Commander directly is a direct influence, obviously. So. But yeah, that being said, what time is it? It's already midnight. What a day. Anyway, we're gonna get going. Thanks for watching. Thanks Drew for making time. I know these always end up being going later than I wanted to be. I talk a lot when I talk.
Yeah, I gotta jam in some words there, otherwise it's gonna be like Aaron, and it's like I'll have a little like side credit,
Yeah, I'll make sure to put your name in the bottom there. It's okay.
Excellent.
All right. Well, again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.
Yep. See you later.